our team's been through a lot. We've won some big hockey games against very good teams here of late, so we won't overthink this one.
Sheldon Keefe not overthinking that 7-2 loss to the Islanders. Welcome back to the Homestand Show. Albert Vartanian, Justin Pooney. And joining us is the man, the myth, the legend, BET99's own Rob Conway, a.k.a. Bobby Conway. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing very, very well. How are you today?
Are you with Sheldon Keefe there?
Yeah. Listen, I was talking to a Leafs fan. It was a friend of mine, and he was like, I didn't even watch the game last night. I'm not really that interested. I said, if you're really not that interested to watch it, how do you think they feel playing the game?
That's a good point.
It's human nature, man.
Yeah.
Listen, they know who they're playing. They know what's going on. Look, you don't want to get embarrassed, and your captain's getting booed. You should play a little bit more, but it's human nature. You might miss out on a game or two.
What's the old saying? When you take a deuce, you don't look at it, you just flush it, right? And that's what the Leafs got to do. They just got to flush this game and move
I have
forward.
never heard that saying in my life, dude. Have you ever heard
I have not, but I get the point.
I can go somewhere with that. I'm not going to because I don't know what we can say and what we can't say on this show.
Right.
Let's continue with the Toronto Maple Leafs. They're in action tonight against the Florida Panthers. It's going to be a tough game. Panthers trying to get into the playoffs.
Yeah.
Like a point behind the Pittsburgh Penguins, who picked up a huge win against Colorado last night. I totally get like some of these games, quote unquote, don't matter. They do. I think for the Toronto Maple Leafs, especially for Keefe trying to figure out his lines, his deep pairings, and also they don't have home ice advantage yet. That's, I think, is really important. So I don't know if you can dismiss all those games, but yes, you lose 7-2 to the Island. You're already locked into a playoff spot. You can chalk it up as whatever. It was just a bad night. But back to juggling lines with Sheldon Keefe. At what point does Keefe have to just make a decision and say, hey, listen, I know we don't have O'Reilly, but I need to start getting these lines sorted for the playoffs?
I think soon. You want to get a 5-6 game stretch heading into the playoffs where you're pretty confident in what you're seeing. It's almost like, it's not the same, but it's almost like exhibition games or spring training or something. Eventually, getting close to the regular season, you want to get your real lineup in there. Well, let's look at it that way for the Leafs. They want to get that real lineup in there as best they can, of course with injuries, that they're going to see in game one. I don't know if he's just juggling lines or if there's other statements being made. Like, I mean, putting Nylander down in the lineup is something that's happened before. If he's talking with Nylander saying, hey, look, we're just trying to get the other guys going. Don't worry about this. Isn't some message I'm sending you. I'm okay with that. If you're sending a message to a guy this late in the season when you're kind of locked in and he's having an all-star year, I'm not loving that, but you do want to find out what you got in everybody.
Well, I think you mentioned with O'Reilly, he's still got to come back, and that's a big piece in this line that's going to require some chemistry and juggling the lines once again. I think it's just going to be something they have to deal with going forward because of injuries and stuff like that. And then they're still trying to figure out their defense pairings. They've been running 7D, then 6D, 7D, 6D, 11 forwards and stuff like that. So I think this is just what they're going to be doing. They're just going to be running, lines, juggling them, and see what pairings work. Keep that in the back of your mind. Come playoff time, then you can adjust that, and you can alter on the fly.
Yeah, I just think you got to figure out sooner rather than later because I think it could affect the team. Actually, here's Sheldon Keefe on talking about how maybe that line juggling could be affecting the team.
So I think it's a little bit too easy maybe to point to that. Individually, their players need to stay with their game. I don't think, any of the changes that we've made are anything too foreign or uncommon. It's been really common line mates and certainly common pairs that we've gone with all the way through. So I don't think we can point to that too much. Certainly on defense, there's been some of that. But all of this is essentially a byproduct of losing O'Reilly, and it's the reality that we're dealing with. But as I mentioned, I think we've rallied at different times to compete against the best teams in the league and find ways to win games. So to point to anything when maybe it doesn't go well would be letting us all off the hook too easily.
I mean, that's the answer he's going to give, right? He's not going to say it's going to bother the team. I wonder if Keefe has lines in certain pairings that he's not showing because they're playing Tampa. Maybe he's going to show something else come playoff time.
Why would you hide it then? You can't simulate that in practice. You want to get game reps with those lines and stuff like that. So I think I wouldn't. Really...
Well, the core guys are going to stay in the positions that they're going to be in. You essentially know what the first line is going to be. I think the big question mark is Ryan O'Reilly. Is he a second line guy with Tavares? Is he a third line guy? Tavares is kind of struggling not being on the wing, at least offensively.
Of that with O'Reilly and Tavares on the same line. The foot speed's an issue though with that line. They're not the fastest fleet of foot guys, so I would be concerned about that. But yeah, I think it's just going to be a science experiment until they finally get the right match, and I think that's just how it's going to be for the Toronto Maple Leafs.
They made so many decisions with their lineup for the bottom six that they're trying different ways, and it's a bunch of new players, 6 different guys. It's a lot to try and figure out in a short period of time. But I think the biggest decision is going to be who's playing with Mitch Marner.
Yeah.
That's the biggest decision, because if Matthews can find his way to doing it without Mitch Marner, that's going to make that team so much deeper, so much longer. Because if you can put out O'Reilly, Marner, and Tavares, I think that's a great second line, and that can go up against anybody.
Yeah, we talked about this yesterday with Chris Johnson, and I don't think Matthews is the type of guy to carry a line. I don't think he's like a Crosby. He has in the past, but I think you need Marner with him. I think we saw in the last game, right? They weren't together up until the third period. Keefe brings him on. They score a goal, right? So I think you need your best guy with your other best guy on the top line.
It ties back into what we were talking about Mitch Martin before, how he's the most important player on this team and where he slots in on that lineup. Look, Austin Matthews, you know he's going to put the puck in the back of the net, or at least you hope he does in the playoffs. But Mitch Marner, to me, is the key. He's the engine of this Toronto Maple Leafs, especially up front. However he goes, the Leafs will go. And I think that is what Sheldon Keefe's biggest thing is. Where does he slot in? You put him with Tavares and O'Reilly, or you put him with Matthews and lower up that front line as well. So that's going to be, to me, the biggest and most important thing Sheldon Keefe has to decide, where do you put Mitch Marner?
We'll be talking about number one goalies and lines up until the start of the playoffs. Well, they take on the Panthers tonight. How about Matthew Tkachuk? I was mentioning this to Justin off air. The quietest 96-point season ever. Is that a byproduct of playing in Florida?
Part of it's byproduct playing in Florida. Part of it is the fact that they're trying to get into a playoff spot, and they had 122 points last year. So it's like an underwhelming. I just point the team is significantly worse performing with you on it. So even though it's not his fault, but like they're just flying under the radar as a team in general. Do I want to play this team in the first round of the playoffs? Probably not. This is a team that has the ability to put goals in bunches, but like guys like Barkov, they've had drop-off years, starting to get a bit more healthy, but a guy like Tkachuk, he was the MVP at the All-Star game. There are other things that he was getting exposure for, but yes, it's not a Canadian market. It's not even a popular American market, but also the team itself is struggling.
Yeah, and I think you look at the Calgary Flames too, like with Jonathan Huberdeau. He's not having a good year in Calgary anyway, so when you look at that big trade that kind of happened in the offseason, it hasn't really worked out for either team, to be honest. Yes, Tkachuk has 96 points, but the drop-off they had from last year. So, but he's also happy to be in the States. So I think that was his biggest reason why he wanted to leave Calgary. He wanted to be back in the States, close to family, away from the Canadian media. And he's showing you why he's one of the best players in the league.
And much like Toronto, they made that trade to beat Tampa Bay in the playoffs. So right now it's not that important, but you have to make the playoffs to get an opportunity.
Yeah, exactly.
To beat Tampa Bay.
Florida would be a tough out, I think, if they actually got into the playoffs, which they need wins, and they need one tonight. They're favored at home. Bobrovsky getting the start. He's 7-1-1 over his past 9 starts. Matt Murray looks like he's getting the starts for the Toronto Maple Leaf. In the first block, we talked about Connor McDavid's comments. He was asked about the Ohtani and Trout thing in the World Baseball Classic, and he's like, "This is what hockey needs. We need best on best." How can the NHL even go about doing this with their quote unquote ban of NHL players going to the Olympics?
They have to figure out a way of getting a World Cup going. He's absolutely correct. That was unbelievably compelling television.
I loved it.
Ohtani against Trout, bottom of the ninth, 3-2 count, 1-run game, 2 best players on the planet. You can't
teammates.
You can't You can't create that any other way than putting them on the field with national jerseys on. So for him to say that, the most important player in the NHL, that should be an extremely strong statement to figure out to both the PA to the NHL to figure out a way of making that happen, because it would be very poor to not get to see McDavid play with the Crosby. Watching Gretzky play with Lemieux was unbelievable in that 87 Canada Cup, World Cup, whatever.
To see a Matthews go against a McDavid or something like that, to see that would be...
Okay, so if McDavid is Ohtani, who's Trout? Does that exist?
Does he have
Draisaitl?
I mean,
No,
teammate-wise, it would be Draisaitl, but it would be Matthews.
But does it exist? No, I don't think
same-
so. I don't think it's on the same level as Ohtani Trout. Matthews and McDavid,
Because
is it?
McDavid is so head and shoulders above the rest, I think.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
I don't know if
we don't have to get into a big MLB discussion, but Ohtani is a top 10 pitcher and a top 3 hitter.
Yeah.
So he is head and above.
Then it
No,
would-
that's what I'm
Trout.
saying.
Yeah.
I'm saying McDavid is Ohtani. Where's the Trout?
That's Draisaitl.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
Mike Trout's one of the best players in the
Leon
world.
Draisaitl's one of the best players in the world.
I just don't know if he's at that level. This is a whole nother
What do you
conversation.
mean?
You know what's most upsetting about all of this is that how exciting was it to watch those two guys play a meaningful baseball game? Come on, Angels.
That's what
That's
everyone
real
says.
conversation.
That
The
was
Angels,
fantastic. How much time we have left, Sean? 10 seconds. All right. Bobby Conway of BET99. Always a pleasure having you on. Coming up after the break, Mikey Singh will be in here to talk some TFC and what's going on with Lorenzo Insigne.